I have PenFed, that's a fact.
I have PenFed, that's a fact.
My credit card purchases get me cash back.
My credit card purchases get me cash back.
No one else gets these rewards.
Sergeant, that is just plain untrue.
What in tarnation?
Sir, PenFed's Paracash Rewards Card isn't just for military members. Anyone can get cash back on all purchases.
Ah, Figgins, you've ruined my favorite song.
PenFed Credit Union. Visit PenFed.org/PowerCash. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed, insured by NCUA.
Today on News 4 at 4, we're working for you. An inside look at the local COVID vaccine trial for kids, what children reported days after getting the shot, and how it could impact the timeline of kids being vaccinated. Today at 4 p.m. on NBC4.
Tonight, it's The Voice Live rounds, and Nick Jonas wants his first win.
Let's get this done.
Who's got what it takes, and whose dream ends here? Watch live and vote to save your faves. The Voice Live rounds, tonight on NBC.
You're in the place where mysteries and the missing meet, where conspiracies lurk around every corner. Welcome to the Deep, Dark Truth.
Welcome back to The Deep Dark Truth. I'm Mo, and today we're going to be doing things just a little bit differently. Mikey and Chip will be joining me later in the episode, as well as two very special guests. Today we're going to be covering Philadelphia's oldest cold case, that of the boy in the box. This is where we give you a graphic content warning and a sexual content warning, as we are going to be discussing the death of a child and sexual abuse. Some parts will inevitably be hard to hear, and we do advise listener discretion. As this is a true crime episode, we will not be taking a sponsor for this episode, but we would love if you took a second to pause to send us a question for our Q&A episode that we'll be recording in 2 days. True crime, conspiracies, cryptid, the paranormal, or more personal questions, absolutely anything goes. And if you know the show, you know that we mean anything. You can call or text them to the tip line at 313-355-3411, email us at thedeepdarktruthpodcast@gmail.com, or tag us anywhere on social media. And while you're at it, make sure that you are subscribed so that you are ready for all future episodes. We have received more requests to do this episode than any other since we started the show almost 2 years ago. But it had been covered by much larger shows than ours on YouTube and by other podcasters, and I didn't feel that we would be adding anything new to the conversation so much as regurgitating the words of those that came before us. So what changed? We have a few special guests for this episode. Author Jim Hoffman, who wrote The Boy in the Box, America's Unknown Child, and is the source for one of the most popular theories of the boy's identity, and Angelina Wilson, host of Kidmissing Radio and the creator of the Boy in the Box Facebook group, which has generated a lot of tips. We will be hearing from them later in the episode after we tell you a little bit about the timeline. First, I want to talk about a few people that will be mentioned several times throughout this episode and hopefully make it more easy to follow later. The first is Remington Bristow. He's an investigator of the medical examiner's office who worked tirelessly to find the name of the boy in the box, even after he retired. He sadly passed away in 1993. The second is Tom Augustine, a Philadelphia police lieutenant in charge of the boy's case from 1998 to 2006. He is now retired, but is still dedicated to the boy's story. Bill Kelly and Joe McGillen are Vidocq Society investigators. Speaking of which, the Vidocq Society, according to its website, describes itself as being founded in 1990 in Philadelphia to further the resolution of long unsolved homicides. It's made up of volunteer forensic experts and investigators who serve as confidential consultants to assist law enforcement in solving difficult cold cases. Another is Rutt or Rutledge, either will be used, a pseudonym for a tipster that came to have contact with both of my guests today, as well as author Lou Romano in regards to the theory of the boy in the box. His involvement will also come up later. I think that's enough. So with that said, let's get started on the timeline. On February 25th, 1957, a man happened across the body of a deceased little boy between the ages of 4 and 6. I should note that his age has been revised to be between 4 and 5, and one of my guests, Angie, has been told by a geneticist that that age has been narrowed down to 4. He was wrapped in a blanket and abandoned in a box in the Fox Chase area of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, near Susquehanna Road, earning him the moniker the boy in the box. The police would later discover during the course of their investigation that the man who found the boy, who was a college student, had waited a day to contact the police. They also found out that the boy had been discovered even prior to that by a young muskrat hunter who was worried that he would be in trouble for poaching and was checking his muskrat traps. The police searched the area thoroughly as they were aided by 270 members of the police academy. As a result, they were able to discover many items that they hoped could lead them to find the identity of the little boy. These items included a white handkerchief with a G monogram, a child's scarf, a yellow child-size flannel shirt, size 4, about the same size as the boy, black shoes in a children's size 1, and a blue men's corduroy hat. The blanket the boy was wrapped in, as well as the box themselves, were also potential clues for the police to investigate. So one by one, let's go through all of those things and the potential leads that they generated. The box the boy had been placed in was in surprisingly good condition and was able to be identified as a JCPenney box that had previously contained a white bassinet. They were able to trace it to a specific JCPenney in Upper Darby, Pennsylvania, 15 miles from where the boy was found, but unfortunately at the time, JCPenney only took cash, making it nearly impossible to find the buyer of that very specific bassinet. What they did know is that 11 of the items were purchased in the time frame that they were looking for, and in an attempt to find answers, the police department ran an ad in a local paper, and all but 2 of the purchasers of that bassinet came forward. It was further discovered that the blanket the boy had been wrapped in had been recently washed. It was also previously mended, and it had a piece of it missing. It was sent out for analysis and was determined that it was made in one of 2 locations, but ultimately there were 1.5 million sold. Another dead end. The blue corduroy hat found nearby on the path leading to where the boy was found, however, did provide the police with more information, as the hat had in fact been customized. A shopkeeper was able to not only identify that the hat had been made in that specific store, but remembered it well due to it being customized by the addition of a leather buckle. The shopkeeper described the man as being between the ages of 26 and 30, with blonde hair, that the man appeared blue-collar and had no discernible accent. Compared to the photo that had been made public of the little boy, he had enough similarities to the boy that she believed that they could have been related. No actionable information was gleaned through the white handkerchief, aside from the monogram. Some hair was obtained, but it did not match with the boy. The same could be said for the child-sized scarf, flannel shirts, and shoes, which did not fit the boy, as the coroner had attempted to put them on the boy's feet. Additionally, approximately a quarter mile away, a deceased cat was found wrapped in a sweater with a blanket. While the blanket or any of the other materials didn't match the boy or the blanket found with him, it does lead to many questions about whether or not the cat was some sort of trial run, at least in my mind. I haven't heard of this specific aspect of the case covered in anywhere. No one seemed to think anything of it, but I'll be mentioning it again later, so I wanted to bring it up now. While most of the theories in this case lean towards an accidental death being covered up, the presence of an animal being covered in such a way does make you question what else someone was using this dumping ground for. Later, the coroner was able to make a lot of conclusions during the boy's autopsy. The little boy had either been recently bathed or had otherwise been immersed in water, such as swimming, before the death, as his fingers were pruned. His hair had been recently cut, and he was naked aside from a blanket that had been wrapped around him, leading many to believe that the child must have been cared for. But if this was true, where was his family? An array of other conclusions were drawn, the most important of which was the boy's cause of death, which was ruled blunt force trauma to the head. There was also significant bruising on his head and body, and he appeared to be malnourished. The coroner determined that the boy could have passed away any time from 2 to 3 days to 2 to 3 weeks prior, due to the cold weather that the area was experiencing at the time, preserving the body much better than you would normally see in a person that had been exposed to the elements. Dye present in the boy's eyes indicated that he would have been to an eye doctor in the last day or so. The autopsy further revealed that the boy had several scars, including an L-shaped scar on his chin and what appeared to be a cut-down scar scar on his left ankle. For reference, a cut-down scar is when they would make a cut in order to find a vein, usually for easy access for transfusions or if there's other health issues at play. Speaking of other health issues, there was evidence of a previous Whipple procedure, which is a very uncommon procedure in children as it's most commonly used for those with cancerous tumors, pancreatitis, pancreatic trauma, and ailments typically not found in small children. There was also no signs that he had been previously vaccinated to be able to compare those records, which wasn't necessarily uncommon in this time if the boy was not yet attending school. It was possible that the health problems leading to the Whipple procedure or other complications is what led the boy to appear malnourished. During the autopsy, they took his fingerprints, which they would later compare to all known records of children in his believed age range in the area's local hospitals. Just one of the several things that the police department did to try and discover the boy's identity. This is not a case of the police doing too little or making moves too late. The detectives working on this case were incredibly invested, hoping that the little boy would be given his name back, and they went miles above what you would expect for a Jane, John, or Baby Doe at the time. And if you listen to the show, you know that if there were a lot of mistakes made, we would be the first ones to point them out.
Okay, parachutes ready.
Boy, the things I go through to get auto loan rates as low as 0.99% APR for 60 months on new vehicles with PenFed.
You are aware that you don't have to be a military member to save hundreds on your auto loan, aren't you? Anyone can join PenFed.
As someone terrified of heights, I probably should have looked into that.
Probably.
Drop me off at the shore.
PenFed Credit Union. Visit PenFed.org/autos or call 1-800-247-5626. Advertised rates available through the PenFed car buying service. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed, insured by NCUA.
All this week on NBC4, new products to new technology. Susan Hogan is showing you how local restaurants are changing the way we dine in and take out in this new world. Tonight at 6.
A new twist on outdoor eating.
A lot of it is creating flexibility.
How one local restaurant is making their outdoor space mobile, giving you plenty of sunshine and social distance for a stress-free meal.
It's all part of restaurant revitalization. Tonight at 6 on NBC4, working for you.
They dispense thousands of flyers with a post-mortem photo of the boy, even going so far as to have them given out with every gas bill. They ran down dozens upon dozens of leads, some of those who swore that the boy was their own family member, but they hit dead ends everywhere that they turned. Someone had to be missing this boy, and there were so many unique circumstances in this case that it's hard to fathom how they had not yet been able to determine his identity. Surely a surgeon would easily remember doing a Whipple procedure on someone so young, or the eye doctor would remember him after such a highly publicized photo. Is it possible that the boy wasn't from that area at all, and was instead from a neighboring state? In 2 hours' time, you could find yourself in Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, or New York, and right across the bridge, you could be in New Jersey. Where was the boy from, and why had no one claimed him yet? Before we get to the theories, I want to fast forward a few years and talk a little bit about discoveries and things that cropped up later. In 1998, with scientific strides that had been made in DNA analysis, it was determined that it would be beneficial for the boy to be exhumed. They did so, and DNA samples were extracted from his teeth. He had originally been buried in a potter's field, or a burial ground of unmarked graves. A detective donated the clothes from his own child, and other detectives all donated their money to give the boy a proper headstone. The headstone read, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy. February 25th, 1957. The day the boy was found." After he was exhumed in 1998, he was moved to Ivy Hill Cemetery, which had donated a rather large plot in his honor. In January of 2015, accountant turned forensic artist Carl Kopelman did a new sketch of the boy. As of 2019, 8 of his sketches were able to get John and Jane Does identified, and it sparked new hope that perhaps the boy would be able to be identified and to find peace. If you saw our graphic for this episode, the rendition that is on the graphic is in fact the creation of Carl Kopelman. Dozens of leads and theories have been proposed over the years, but for the purposes of not having a 10-hour episode, we're going to be focusing on 3 of the most circulated and widely purported in true crime circles. so we could speak a little bit more extensively on them. We absolutely recommend that you give Jim's book a read, and not just because he's our guest today. Before reading it, I couldn't fathom the amount of information that has to be left out of shows like ours in order to make a succinct episode that won't either confuse the listener or become an entire podcast of its own. The first theory concerns a foster home that was located nearby. Remington Bristow, an investigator of the medical examiner's office, was a huge supporter of this theory. He was made further a believer when a psychic took him directly to the house without prompting or any information about the case. At one point, he attended an estate sale at the home where he discovered a bassinet similar to the one that would have been in the JCPenney box, as well as blankets that were similar to the blanket that the boy was found wrapped in. Remington believed that the boy's death was the result of an accident and was covered up because he was born to the stepdaughter of the man who ran the foster home. As a young unwed mother, Bristow believed that his death was obscured so no one would ever learn of the girl's circumstances. Philadelphia Police Lieutenant Tom Augustine, who was in charge of the investigation in 1998, as well as members of the Doc Society, interviewed the foster father and the stepdaughter, who he had married, but they couldn't find anything to further substantiate the theory. Though I must mention an extension of the theory that if the stepdaughter had a child out of wedlock with her stepfather, and the boy's DNA would confirm such a thing, that would additionally be a strong motivator for disposing of the body in such a crude way. Unfortunately, Remington Bristow died in 1993 without ever knowing the identity of the boy in the box. Next, let's talk about what is widely known as the M theory. On February 25th, 2000, another theory resulted from the police being contacted by a mental health professional. Her client, M, had called her in the middle of the night to schedule a meeting for later that morning, and the psychiatrist wanted to know if a particular set of circumstances had ever happened to their knowledge. In this section, I'm going to be quoting directly from Jim Hoffman's book, The Boy in the Box, America's Unknown Child, the revised edition from 2012, quite a bit, as it contains a very detailed account of the events that took place. Quote, M could not keep quiet any longer. The psychiatrist had first been told the story back in 1989, but M wasn't ready to speak to authorities yet. It is perhaps interesting to note that M called her psychiatrist on the morning of February 25th, 2000, the same day that the college student, Frederick J. Bononis, first stumbled upon the boy in the bassinet box while chasing a rabbit some 43 years earlier. The Philadelphia Police Department received a call from M psychiatrist sometime later, while the nervous patient sat nearby. Quote, was a boy ever found in a field in 1957? The psychiatrist asked the officer on the other line, McGillen. M had never heard of the boy in the box case. This lead was too good to be true. Put in touch with Detective Tom Augustine, M would speak with Augustine on and off over the phone and by letter for some 2 years. McGillen told me that the letters would be written with the meaning essentially being, we implore you to please come forward and tell what you know. M initially refused to divulge her name. She was under intense emotional stress. At first, quote, playing a cat and mouse game, unquote, according to McGillen, M was cagey with her answers. She would admit that her current position in life placed her in danger. She was a successful businesswoman now, and she felt there might be reprisals from her mother's evil circle of friends. McGillen told me. As a result, Augustine had been careful with what he said. He spoke to her by telephone while she was in her psychiatrist's office. She wanted to have the doctor there during the phone calls. Sometimes the questions were not to her liking, and M would threaten to hang up on Augustine. These interviews were, quote, like walking on eggshells, unquote, for Augustine, McGillen added. To his credit, which is why he is considered Philadelphia's finest homicide detective. Augustine persevered. In fact, Tom Augustine makes Sherlock Holmes look like a Boy Scout. According to McGillen in 2001, through Augustine's adroit questioning, M was led to reveal her parents' names and the Lower Merion address in a phone conversation. A major break and spiritually significant for McGillen and Kelly, who were devout Catholics, on the eve of Palm Sunday. Immediately after church, McGillen and Kelly drove to the old neighborhood of M and began confirming her family's presence through inhabitants of the neighborhood. Longtime neighbors even remembered her taking walks with her father. Sadly, the boy's presence could not be confirmed by anybody. Unquote. And there is a link to everywhere that you can find our guest Jim Hoffman and his works in the show notes. M claimed that her mother had purchased the boy, whose real name was Jonathan, in 1954, and that the boy was heavily abused both physically and sexually for 2.5 years. On the evening of his death, M described a situation where the boy had vomited up baked beans and was beaten for it. As a result, his head was slammed against the floor during this altercation. While he was being bathed afterwards, M stated that the boy passed away, likely the result of head trauma. She then explained that her mother cut the boy's long hair to conceal his identity and forced M to go with her to the Fox Chase area to leave the boy. But as they were preparing to get the boy out of the trunk, they encountered a man passing by who asked them if they needed help. The man was reassured that they were okay and left soon after. This theory not only aligns with a large amount of evidence, but it also aligned with some that was never released by the police. The coroner had in fact found a brown substance in the boy's throat during the autopsy, something that M couldn't have known when discussing baked beans. The man who passed them and asked for help had in fact been interviewed about the situation, but he had believed that the woman had a young boy with her and not a young girl. M explained that this was because when she was young, she looked and dressed boyishly. Also, the cause of death, blunt force trauma to the head, was consistent with this theory. Police were unable to verify all the details of her story, however, and had concerns over her mental health history. Others who had been to M's house on a number of occasions believed the claims to be ridiculous, as they had never met the boy on any of those occasions. The M theory kind of leads us into our next theory by our guest Jim Hoffman. After Jim researched and released the first edition of his book and joined the Boy in the Box Facebook group, this led him to being put in contact with a tipster, pseudonym Rutledge, by our other guest, Angie. Rut claimed that his family had rented to another who he believed were the parents of the boy, as he had remembered him from his childhood. Perhaps this was the child that M's family had purchased. Jim teamed up with the Philadelphia Police Department, Vidocq Society, and author Lou Romano to request DNA be compared between the boy and this particular family. A sample was taken from the proposed father and sent to the Philadelphia Police Department, but in December of 2017, Homicide Sergeant Bill Kohlmeyer confirmed that the DNA was not a match. However, don't quite count this theory out yet, as there is the possibility that the man was not the boy's biological father, rendering the DNA useless. But hold that thought. Before I'm joined by Chip, Mikey, Jim, and Angelina, I want to let you know a bit of news that was released the day after the interview you are about to hear. This is taken from an article by CBS Philadelphia. Quote, Philadelphia homicide detectives 2 years ago got an order to exhume the remains of the boy in the box. What they were able to retrieve this time for DNA purposes was sent to a lab in Europe that has now given them their biggest break yet. Police now have a DNA profile they hope leads them to family members of the little boy. Investigators say that this gives them new direction, unquote. So stay tuned for more news in the future of any potential breaks in this case. So now it's time for Chip and Mikey to jump in, as we're joined by Jim Hoffman and Angelina Wilson, host of Kidmissing Radio. Jim will be able to further expound on his theories and discoveries he made while writing the book, The Boy in the Box, America's Unknown Child. So Angelina, where did you first encounter or hear about this case?
Oh my gosh, I'm not even sure. Maybe it was either online, or I know that Unsolved Mysteries did one of their, where they do the quick shot.
Yes.
Back when Robert Stack was doing it, they would do like a quick thing about a case. I think he may have done it for this one. That may have been the first time I actually saw it, but I really got into it when I was able to get online. And then as time went on and I started creating my podcast and my website and stuff, I created a Facebook group, and we have over 1,100. I he disappeared, members now in our Facebook group.
So were you already trying to look in the case when you created that Facebook group? Or
nope, I created it.
Were you looking for one and there just wasn't one yet? Or did you just say, I really want to start this?
No, I really wanted to start it, actually.
What for you is the most interesting part of this case that you've encountered so far?
Well, the saddest part is he doesn't have a name, but the most interesting part is probably all of the things that were wrong with him. And how does one disappear off the face of the earth, basically, and lose their identity when you had that much wrong with you, when you were seeing doctors up until 24 hours before you died? And nobody bothers to report you missing. I fail to understand that. That's the thing that gets me. And he was so young, that's what gets me.
What is the most interesting person that you've encountered giving tips or giving you information, just letting you know different things about this case through your involvement of creating the Facebook group?
Well, one of them is sitting right here, Jim. I got his book and I lent it out and never got it back. But anyway, he's laughing. But also pseudonym Rutledge, who thinks he knows the family. Jim will probably get more into that, but he's certainly very interesting reading his posts in our group. And I also, in the process of doing the group, became acquainted with the sister of a missing girl that was also featured on Unsolved Mysteries, Tammy Lynn Leppert.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting too how within the true crime community, especially when it comes to victims' families, there's always a family knows another family, and different detectives and people become very intermingled and related, where someone ends up knowing someone else in this context.
Before we get started, if you don't mind, I'd like to just say, Angelina, I think you're a saint. Thank you for all the work you've done. And you really helped the case a lot. I noticed that about the boy in the box. It's just regular everyday people who have pushed it forward. I really appreciate what you've done.
Yes.
And I think you were the first interview I ever did. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. But you are a great person. I really appreciate you. So just want to say that.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm sorry that both of our interviews got deleted because I wasn't a paid member of Blog Talk and they were too old.
Yeah, it's okay.
But Angelina has since moved platforms and is with a different hosting service. And you can find a link to her podcast in the show notes if you want to go and check her out. So first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, Jim.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Angelina. So thank you. Anyway, thank you. And thank you, Angelina, again. No problem. I appreciate it. It's all about the boy. She said it. It's all about the boy.
And I will say I originally was never really intended on covering this case, even though it is our most requested case. But I didn't feel like I had anything to add. And when Angelina brought it up, I said, I don't really think I have a lot to add to that conversation. And she said, do you know Jim Hoffman? Here's his book. I really think that you would enjoy interviewing him. He has a lot to say, and just reading your book. And this isn't just because you're on the show. Genuinely, I have watched so much true crime coverage about the boy in the box, and your book is very informative and yet concise. But I learned things I'd never heard ever on any of those things. And part of that is, as podcasters, as content creators, you only have so much time to try and condense that information down, but just very thorough and amazing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
That being said, can you talk a little bit about the theory that came from you researching your book in your own words? We can talk about M first, since it kind of goes into it.
I don't know if you contacted Tom Augustine, the retired homicide detective. But,
I did.
I'll say I respect the guy 100%. He's a saint too. He dedicated a lot of his life to this case. He does not believe that M is telling the truth. He believes the boy was connected to the foster home and the Nicolettis. But I believe M's story. There's too much circumstantial evidence that ties her in to this. And she's the woman that claims her mother purchased the boy and used them as, forgive me, I don't know how else to say it, as like a sex toy, kept them in a coal bin in the basement, and in a fit of rage later killed him, and then just thought, oh, well, let's just go dump him on Susquehanna Road. For me, it's very poignant because I live in the high desert, and they have all kinds of what I would call Susquehanna roads, where it's like a gravel road and people just dump stuff like it's just a trash bin. So anyway, she dumped it on Susquehanna Road, and we've been wondering ever since: is M really connected to this person and to the boy in the box? And I don't know 100%. I believe that's the most valid theory. There's enough evidence to support it. So anyway.
Yourself and Lou Romano, you both had a contact and therefore had tips that matched each other. So what was that conversation like? Tell us a little bit how that came about.
You had my wheels. I had to turn my wheels again. So I had to get my book out and go into my timeline and stuff. But in November of 2012, Rutledge, who Angelina mentioned, contacted me. He believes his family rented to the father and possibly the mother of the boy in the box. 2013, most of the year, he and I would call the Philadelphia Police Department. I talked to Sergeant Kuhlmeyer. I talked to Bill Fleischer of the VDUC Society about the case, tried to push them to get DNA. And then in December 2013, Lou, I guess, became associated with Angelina's group, contacted Rut. Rut put him in contact with me, and then we started talking and researching, and he's a real firecracker. I really respect Lou. He's a great writer, too. And he was researching a fictionalized account. So anyways, we found that this the son of the man that rented from Rutt's family, and we got the information on the family from Rutt himself, who did his own investigation. It's incredible. And we've tracked him down in Memphis. Lou, being this top-notch salesman, calls the guy up. Hey, this is what I'm doing. Can I come down? At first, the guy was like, hell no. But Lou doesn't take no for an answer. I don't know. I called him a couple times. Finally, the guy realized Lou's not, in for it other than for the truth. And Lou flew down there, got the DNA. Philadelphia Police Department, with all due respect, I'm not questioning them or judging them, but they said they lost it. They couldn't find it. Whatever happened. Finally, I don't think they used Lou's. They said they needed to do their own procedures. They went and got DNA from this guy, and it didn't match. Man, I've dedicated so much of my life to this, but I understand that's the way it goes. Sometimes you push, you research, you push this idea, and it's what they call rabbit hole. It was a rabbit hole.
We're very familiar with rabbit holes here on this here show.
So one day I was thinking to myself, I remember Lou telling me that family's really dysfunctional. And, infidelity was really common. And so I called him up one day and I said, this was only like 6 months ago or something. And I said, Lou, the Philadelphia Police Department could be right, but we could be right. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, if the father had this boy out of wedlock, it wasn't the mother's. And then the mother, said, well, the hell with you, had a child out of wedlock, and it's this man that's in Memphis. They don't have the same DNA. And I always believe that the police department really needs to exhume this man, the father's body, once and for all, and match it. However, I had heard, I think we talked about it last week in the pre-interview, that they've been pursuing, this case through like DNA or ancestry and stuff like that. And I believe I read that I think it was Bill Fleischer of the VDUC Society said they're close to solving the case, which tells me that they found some relatives.
I also read that article.
What parts of the case do you think aren't discussed enough? Like what's rarely mentioned that really should be talked about?
Wow, that's a great question. Never been asked that before. I don't know. In my opinion, people don't realize how much the investigators went out of their way, gave up large chunks of their lives to try to solve this case, and they didn't solve it. Remington Bristow, who died in 1993 of heart failure, and how It reminds me of the Zodiac investigators. A lot of them became alcoholics. They went nuts, to some degree. And Bill Kelly, who was really good friends with Remington, told me the story, and it's in the book, that he went down to see Rem and right before he died, and Rem was in his basement with the death mask of the boy, stroking it, like he's alive. And Bill realized, my God, he just went off the deep end, and I think it was an eye opener for Bill Kelly, because he at that point he stepped back and he said, I can't do anything more than what I've done. And then he later got involved a few years. He came back out. He told me, it's in the book. He told me how he came back out of retirement because of a lead, which he had already pursued 30 years before, but no one realized it. But that's a whole nother, it's kind of a funny story. But anyways, so I think people, and it's not just investigators, it's regular people like Angelina. I would love to know how many hours she spent. These are regular people, but the little boy, he's a little unknown boy. What happened to him? What's his name? It's amazing what people have done, dedicated for no pay, nothing, just to try to solve this case. And I don't know if people realize that. That's one thing that struck me when I was researching and wrote my book. So.
No, this was so much love and care. This was so much love and care. I mean, they dressed this child and sat him up to make him look alive for their posters. The gas company put his picture on all their bill envelopes. I mean, this was just love and care.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive. Have you tried the Name Your Price tool yet? It works just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. It's easy to start a quote, and you'll be able to find a rate that works for you. It's just one of the many ways you can save with Progressive. Get your quote today at Progressive.com and see why 4 out of 5 new auto customers recommend Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Today on News 4 at 4, we're working for you. An inside look at the local COVID vaccine trial for kids, what children reported days after getting the shot, and how it could impact the timeline of kids being vaccinated. Today at 4 p.m. on NBC4.
Tonight, it's The Voice Live rounds, and Nick Jonas wants his first win.
Let's get this done.
Who's got what it takes, and whose dream ends here? Watch live and vote to save your faves. The Voice Live rounds, tonight on NBC.
And I will say, Angelina is absolutely dogged. She is out there every single day trying to get people interested in the case, trying to bring new blood into the case, trying to get any information from experts that she can to get people to talk about it, because the more people talk about it, the more likely it is to get it solved. And this is not a case. And I will have said this in the timeline. I will continue to say it because I've never seen a case like this where the police they ran down so many leads. They were putting ads in papers. They were putting out flyers. They were doing everything they possibly could and more, a lot more than was expected of them, in my opinion. And then they even raised the money to get the headstone all together, putting their own money. One of the detectives donated their own child's clothing for the boy to be buried in. So this is just above and beyond. It normally in cold cases, that's not the case. There's very obvious mistakes. There's very obvious leads that were never followed up on, but that is not the case.
Thank you. And I want to recognize someone too. My friend for over 30 years that I went to high school and church youth group with, Dawn Brooks, is in our group. She's one of our admins. She's been dogged on this case since I started this group too. So just to give people credit.
Absolutely.
And this is we're all interconnected. I mean, so what? I wrote the book. So what? Angelina creates that Facebook page. Rut gets sucked in. Then Rut contacts me. Then Lou gets sucked. See, it's all connected, interconnected. And if it wasn't for that Facebook page, Rut wouldn't know really who I was. Lou Romano wouldn't know who I was or who Rut was. So, a lot of people did a lot of legwork, but they're not really recognized for it. And so I want to make sure everyone understands what Angelina's done. So, and there are others like her.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Seriously. Amazing. How did you first become interested in The Boy in the Box in order to write about it?
Yeah, I often wonder, what did I do to go, that long winding road. So around January 2006, I was in Hesperia High School, in my room, and I'm sitting there. It's like January 3rd or something, and I'm like, I want to write a story. And I always was interested in a little boy named Laddie McGee out of Chicago. I can't get into the specifics. He was abused really bad and killed. And his brother was on Oprah and stuff like that. Anyways, I couldn't find anything on him. And then I found this website. I think it's called Angelina's Place or something like that. And I clicked, and it was honoring children that had been murdered or abused. Clicked on it, looking through, Boy in the Box, what's that? Clicked on it, and I was just blown away. And one of the things that really attracted me was all these people coming forward, that synergy. And so I had read before that Tom Cruise would spend 6 months researching before he'd write his screenplays. And I think it was Valkyrie was the movie I couldn't remember last week when Mo and I were talking, and I said, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to really spend 6 solid months just researching. And that's what I did. So I was just the other day, I was looking through, I got all this stuff that my kids will go, and they'll throw it away someday. But it's all legal pads and stuff. And I researched using websites and every article I could find. And there was a lot out there. But then I started to pursue, people who are still alive, like Bill Kelly, Joe McGillen, Tom Augustine, and so on. And so I wrote the first book in June of 2006. And then around October, I got a call from Kevin King from Rooftop Publishing. He's like, I really want to publish this, but it's got to be nonfiction. It's got to be nonfiction. I said, no problem. What I did was I wrote a fictionalized account because I didn't have the life rights. I didn't want to get sued by these guys. And all I did was change the names from, Bill to, Bobby or something. And so, and I remember Bill reading it going, wow, this is really accurate, Jim. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, no doubt. But I was, I did it that way originally. So anyways, I got the life rights, and then I went to, and I wrote a nonfiction account. But I'd already had it in my head, and I wrote it within 2 months. And the 50th anniversary was February of 2007. So it was published by Rooftop 2007, February 12th. And, and I think, you asked me about how did I get started. And, one of the things I got to admit, my family suffered. They did, because I was always researching and writing. And my wife, we talk about it. So Angelina knows my wife through Facebook, I think. But, and she's like, you really lost a lot. I gave up a lot. But I know Tom Augustine told me about a year ago, he said, don't let this suck you in, And I said, I think it's too late for that, But anyways, I have 3 editions. My 3rd edition, I just published 2 years ago because I wanted to put the backstory in there. And I was telling Mo about it. We've gone through a lot. This case doesn't leave me alone because whether people want to believe it or not, we've dealt with hauntings ever since the 3 Detective Augustine sent me the 3 case files boxes to my house. And we've had to deal with hauntings. And I believe it's the mother. She's my wife, who is a psychic and very sensitive, has told me it's the mother. She's angry that you dragged her name up and you won't let it go. And just recently we've had accounts, situations in our house where we live now. So it follows you, by the way. You can't move away from this stuff. So I'm sorry. I don't know if that's the answer you wanted, but
No. It's definitely the answer that I was looking for. I mean, it's really, really interesting.
It's engulfed me, and reality. I can't go back. I would do it over if I could, but I know that it did engulf me. And but if I told Mo last week, I just want to know his name before I die. I don't want to have to go meet him in the tunnel and say, "What's your name?" I want to know before I get there. That's all I want. So. Anyways.
Yeah, actually, on that note, because that's kind of one of the questions I wanted to ask about how this has affected your personal life. So, Angelina, I want to pose that same question to you. How has this affected your personal life? How has this engulfed you? Because you are living, breathing the Facebook group in addition to your own podcast, which is covering other missing and murdered children. How do you separate the two if possible? And if not, how are you existing basically on a day-to-day basis while trying to advocate for this?
Well, for a while, it was about a year and a half. I barely visited the group because I barely did anything on my missings because my father was sick and dying. So for a while there, it was kind of all reality, not very pretty reality, but reality. And then when I came back, I had to do some house cleaning over in the group. And but my friend, like I said, my friend Dawn is pretty good about doing the housekeeping because you have to be careful. You don't want people to either sue you, and you don't want stuff on there that's irrelevant because people will turn away. So that's kind of what I had to do. But as far as it affecting me, my mother is helping me with the case. In fact, she said she wanted to see the case file because I told her, I said, Jim had it. She said, I would love to see that. And I said, yeah, but Jim said some really strange things started happening at his house when I was in his house. But I get it because ever since my father died, I swear he's here. He will throw my mother's cell phone across the floor. It'll be sitting somewhere and he'll just throw it across the floor. So I believe it. But as far as I just wanted to mention that Rem Bristow was actually the medical examiner's investigator. And his big theory was the Nicoletti family. That DNA didn't match either. They were a strange group. I mean, I think I told you in our pre-interview that the stepfather married the stepdaughter after the mother died. I mean, that's just bizarre. And the reason, by the way, that I had said that he had medical attention 24 hours or so before he died was because of these fluorescent eye drops that they found he had not yet metabolized, that they could still see in his eyes.
And if I could add, Detective Tom Augustine believes it's the Foster family. Their house is like a mile from the dump site. I've been to the house. And his thinking is that that guy had 20 to 30 kids. The house is huge. It's a stone house. It's huge. It looks creepy, to be honest with you. But he had anywhere from a few kids up to like 30 kids. And Rem Bristow theorized, who's to say that someone just said, hey, Arthur, I need to get rid of this kid here. All right, I'll take him. I know someone who will buy him or whatever. And Rem said, no one's going to notice. Bill Kelly said, no one's going to notice. He's already got all these kids. He was like a state sanctioned orphanage.
Yeah, especially if you are a known orphanage, I'm sure that it becomes like a fire station of sorts. When you are a huge orphanage in this area, somebody just dropping off a child versus the child being taken by the state or left at a hospital or a fire station or et cetera, it becomes a lot more likely. And it becomes a lot easier to cover up the fact that the child was ever there. I'm sure that they weren't interrogating all of the foster children, but even if they would have, a lot of them are in and out of the foster system, were somewhere else before they were there, wouldn't have been there at the exact same time. There's so many things as these small minute butterfly effects that could have happened in this case.
The records sucked. I know from my mother's own experience in the foster system in the early 60s that she was 12 years old. She was abandoned. She called the state and said, "What do I do?" They said, "Call us back when you find a home." Oh, what? We saw her aunt years later and said, "You never asked where the other 3 kids went to when they only came back with 3 instead of 6. She said, "That wasn't our business." So it makes you wonder if maybe somebody just didn't, Oh, and I wanted to mention about the foster home. One of the big things for Rem was they had the cut in half blankets like was in the box with him.
So, Angelina, I want to pose to you, do you believe the same theory as Jim, that as a result of Rutledge and the tip, etc.? Is that where you're leaning?
Yes. And most of us believe that his first name, and matter of fact, I was talking with Dawn. She came to visit me a couple of weeks ago. And we all agree that to us, his first name is Jonathan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that too. In fact, Bill Kelly's grandson was named Jonathan out of respect.
Aw.
If there was no M, I would be pursuing that foster family theory because, like Angelina said, he went there in 61, I think in May or something, and walked through the estate sale. The family had just literally like this disappeared, and saw the blankets, the log cabins in the back, and then the broken window. I think he found a broken window. He theorized maybe the boy fell out and died that way, or was dazed, went to the pond that they had and fell in the pond and drowned. And that's why he had the washerwoman effect with one of the hands. And what cemented it for Remington Bristow was when he contacted Sternfeld, that New Jersey psychic, and she met him in Philadelphia. And she said to him, "I'm going to tell you where to go," basically. And she drove him to the foster family's house. So to him, that was like major circumstantial evidence that they were connected.
I will say, for me, the number one thing with the M theory is that she told her, I don't remember if it was her therapist or her psychologist, a medical professional, who then contacted the police, which to me, she wasn't looking for clout. She wasn't looking to be involved in a case like we see lots of people confess to murders they've never not only committed, but they weren't even in the same city at the time. She wasn't, in my opinion, looking to be involved in that. It was against her will that was then outed. She
only agreed to come forward and talk to them if they kept her name out of the press. And that's why they used the letter M, because she said, "I don't want to be known." She came from a fairly well-known family. Her mom worked at the Lower Merion High School as a librarian. Her dad worked there as a science teacher. She still feared her mother's, she called evil circle of friends. Even at that age in the early 2000s, she's probably in her 40s or something. And she was afraid she might lose her job. She had earned a doctorate. She worked for a really good company in Indianapolis, I believe, like a drug company. And she thought, they'll never accept me if they find out I have a psychiatrist and so on.
Which is understandable. It really is. It's a fear that a lot of professional people face. I think it's getting a lot more normalized now that, seeking therapy when you aren't necessarily racked with mental illness that is impacting your everyday sort of living. It's a lot more common to go just for grief or just for a short period of time, or we're speaking more about depression and anxiety and being more open with it, but it's still a fear for a lot of people.
Yes.
If that ends up not being the case, what do you then think is the next most likely theory? Or do you think that theory has not been presented yet and maybe there's a blind spot that we haven't seen?
Well, there's a lady that I connected with through another website. It's in the book, and I know her name. She doesn't want to be known, and she's done a lot of research. This lady's I use the word crackerjack researcher, and she followed up with the idea that M claims that her uncle is the father of the boy in the box. And so she really pursued that down to, if in the book, there's a picture. I had to black or cover the face of the mother for legal reasons. But she found a picture of the mom in the local paper. She did genetic research. And so she believes, I call her source R in the book, that it's the illegitimate son of the uncle of M. I don't know. We went back and forth, and the emails are in there in the book, and I'm like, man, I have a hard time believing, hey, Uncle Jim's here. Where's my kid? Oh, he's in the coal bin. Okay. And knowing he's being abused and stuff, but she said, they're crazy people. They think that's okay. You and I don't think that's okay because we're relatively normal. And she made those points. So yeah, that would be the
problem. Yeah. Well, the problem we have with that is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jim, but my understanding is they only have mitochondrial DNA, which, as the DNA, the lady that's doing the genetic genealogy told me, it doesn't really mutate. So it could be thousands of generations back, and it's going to be the same doggone DNA.
Well, that's why they need the original sample, wherever they got it from. And because remember, this was in 1998 when they got the original DNA, and that's 13 years ago. Is that right? Or 23 years ago. So, it's the technology is way advanced. And the lady at Cellmark said I said 100%. She said 100% if we had the original sample. We just need a little bit with the technology we have, and we can do a full-blown DNA sample. That's what she told me.
Angelina, so what would you think is the next most likely scenario?
My mother actually had an idea that, because we know that he was sick, we know that he had many medical procedures, including the Whipple procedure, which is a procedure on the pancreas. Usually for pancreatic cancer, it's rarely done in children. And that could have caused the malnutrition or the appearance of malnutrition. She thinks that maybe the reason that nobody looked for him and nobody questioned was, as you had said to me before, well, if he was very sick, maybe they couldn't afford to bury him and they just, but I don't understand how an ophthalmologist could see you and 24 hours later not know. I mean, I've been going to the same ophthalmologist since I was 2. I can't imagine that he wouldn't, if I had disappeared at 4, wouldn't have said, where's, or if he'd seen my picture in his gas bill, he wouldn't have said, it's got to be the reaction. So I'm wondering too, and could he have been from out of state, because there are other states close to that area? For one thing, New Jersey, and there was a man seen on the bus or the train with a little boy that looked like him coming from New Jersey into Pennsylvania. And like I said, we know it's right across the river from there. So he could have been from out of state. And at the time, his pictures didn't get widely distributed. So maybe his doctors never saw them.
Yeah, and we talked about both of those things quite a bit. One of them being from anywhere around Philly. You could be to Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, all in a matter of 2 hours. You can be in any of those states. So it is possible that they're just a little bit outside of the area. But then we have to go back to the JCPenney box, knowing where it came from, about 15 minutes away. So then maybe we have to start our radius from the JCPenney. But equally, I'm not going to do anything that could be tracked back to me within a certain radius. So I'm not going to go to the JCPenney in my local town and use a box from it for whatever reason, whether an accident, whatever the reasoning may be. If I'm taking the effort to just abandon a child that has passed, I'm not going to do it in my backyard. But you never know. You never know what people will do in a panic. You don't know if the foster home's down the street and they're just looking for something convenient. I also want to bring up something from Jim's book that I feel like I might not have ever heard before. And that is the dead cat. So a dead cat was found not right in the proximity, but I think it was a quarter mile, if I believe correctly, a dead cat isn't strange, but to me, what was strange is the fact that the cat was wrapped up in a sweater, had part of a blanket with them, which did not match the blanket found with the boy. But to me, most people bury their pets out anywhere, always have, in the country, in the city. It doesn't matter. It's a universal thing. A lot of people bury their pets at home, especially before the popularization of pet cemeteries, and probably not a lot for a while after the movie Pet Sematary came out. To me, though, the fact that the cat was wrapped in a sweater, I don't want to say it, but it gives me like first kill vibes. It gives me the vibes of somebody that has purposely killed something, but I could never find information of how did this cat die? Did it just die naturally? Was it, hurt or injured? Had it been possibly stabbed by a person? But the boy is like almost lovingly wrapped, even though, his hair is cut and he's pruned and it's not a professional haircut. And there's all these things. The idea that the cat wasn't just buried, that it was also wrapped in something in the same vicinity, in the same dumping grounds, just something about that just felt so off to me, even though I've never heard somebody else really mention it. Because a lot of times killers start with animals. Their first kill is an animal, or they torture animals. And so something about me just creeped me out. I cannot explain the feeling that I felt when I read it for the first time, even though it seems so unrelated. It seems so unrelated, especially you're hoping that this little piece of the blanket somehow ties back to the boy. But since it never does, it's like, oh, another dead end. That's so unfortunate. But I don't know, something about it being wrapped up almost lovingly, the idea of an animal being wrapped up versus just buried.
Yeah, I chased that blanket. That was with the boy, that half a blanket, down quite a number of days rabbit hole, because my father spent his entire working life just about in textiles, working in the woolen mill. So for me, it was just natural to gravitate toward the blanket. But unfortunately, it was a huge manufacturer who made a whole big bunch. So it wasn't, a place like where my father worked where they didn't make.
I believe the figure Jim talks about in his book is 1.5 million of this blanket. That is an insane amount of blankets. Is that right, Jim?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact figure, but it was a lot, probably over 1 million. Yeah. I just got to say, going back to the idea of the medical issues with the boy, I agree with Angelina. It doesn't make sense. I've always grappled with that. How could he have so many issues and nobody knows? And the only thing that I could think of is, and I go back to M, is that mom had a lot of pull, from what we understand. She was kind of a pillar in the community, and who's to say she went to an ophthalmologist friend and said, "Hey, this kid has something wrong. Here's some eye drops. Don't worry about the prescription." That sort of a thing. We don't, I don't know. Now the surgery is something different. I can't, but the eye drops, and that could possibly be why. I mean, but again, back then we were talking last week about, adoption. It was kind of a joke. They didn't really track kids. Here, take my kid. Okay. That was just kind of the way it was done.
The culmination of people not knowing him, the vicinity of everything that happened, the procedures and the medical issues, all of that at first, when I first started hearing about the case, and I didn't know a whole lot about it until we started diving down into it, my first initial reaction was, he's not from that state. He can't be. How? That was just my first initial. It just makes more sense that he would be out of state, and that's why he's not getting recognized.
Or that his doctors are out of state, because you have to remember New Jersey is just across the river. So if there is a medical condition that he's grappling with, who's to say that the specialists aren't in New Jersey and he's being taken to a doctor in New Jersey or somewhere outside of the Canvas area? We already know that it's at least, I think it's 15 miles to the JCPenney that the bassinet box is purchased at. So who's to say that the doctor just didn't see it either.
And that goes further too. I mean, how many, optometrists were around in that time that were able to do or use those like type things in that vicinity, or even in 100-mile vicinity? It couldn't have been that much in 1957. It was still a very growing area of medical field.
Mm-hmm. Can I just say something about, Jim had mentioned the eye drops maybe just being given to the mother. That's not the kind of eye drops these were. These were eye drops that fluoresced under a specific light to do an examination. So he had to have been in the office for some kind of examination.
Good point. Yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. I was going to say, with with Rutledge, the guy that rented the house was from another state, I think Tennessee. And that they came up, and so if he had an affair and this child came from this man, that maybe he was being treated down below. I have the feeling like if it is M, if M's telling the truth and Rut's correct, the lady said, I can't take it anymore, because M said he had issues to autism, something like that, and take him. I don't want him, And the guy said, I don't want him either, so I'll sell him. I don't know how that would how someone would gravitate to that thinking, but so that might explain why the boy had these procedures done, but no one recognized it in the Philadelphia area.
Yeah, because then the only doctor that you're trying to reach out to get the timeline would be whatever ophthalmologist he saw versus the Whipple procedure and the cut down and whatever repeated surgeries he may or may not have had, and the hospital staff, right? Because it's not just going to be the doctor that did the procedure. It's going to be an OR nurse. It's going to be a check-in person. It's going to be like some type of medical assistant. It's going to be all of those things. So it makes it less and less likely that none of these people are seeing it. But that makes perfect sense. Maybe those procedures were enough time ago, especially since they were healed scars by time we get to the autopsy, that maybe they were far enough away that he had those procedures in Tennessee or New Jersey or wherever.
Yeah, that is a good point. I was thinking when you were talking about the procedures and you were talking about the time that had passed, and that's a good point. And also to Jim's point, back then they really didn't do adoptions the way they do it today. I know that from my own genealogy. My great-grandfather adopted 2 girls, but he never adopted them legally. They just changed their last name when their mother married him. So that's just the way they did it, and I think that could have been, she could have been frustrated his mother with all of the care that he needed, because I did hear that he could have been autistic or something along those lines, but they didn't have those diagnoses back then. They didn't know what autism was. On top of that, having all the medical problems, somebody could have gotten tired of dealing with it and either lost their own temper or gave him away. Like Jim said, that's definitely a possibility. And I am leaning more and more toward he was born somewhere else and the procedures were done somewhere else, because they went through every single footprint of every single child born in Philadelphia during a certain period of time from like 1951 to like 1954 and found nothing. So that tells me he was not born there.
Bill Kelly did a lot of that work, the research, comparing the footprints, and he said a couple of them were so smudged, and he thought, "Oh man, is this the kid?" But you don't know. But one thing that really, the idea of all the medical issues, that I can't explain how they could get away with that. And it almost sounds like he was at like a children's type hospital or a county hospital where they knew, kids were brought in and they were operated on properly, and yet no one knew. So yeah, maybe he did come from out of the area.
And I'm wondering too, if because the Whipple procedure is so rare in children, I'm wondering if there were only a few doctors in the country that did that on children. And that might have been a clue.
And the equipment was very expensive, specifically relating to those eye drops and the lights, like this isn't something that you're just going to be able to ever get a script for, or lights that you're just going to be able to grab from, your pharmacy.
You're right. And I don't know whether ophthalmology was new then or not. As Mikey said, I'm not sure.
The first hospital of ophthalmology was in New York in like 1893. It was the first and only one in the United States of America at that time. And I don't know, 50 years seems like a lot, but, it doesn't progress as quickly as technology does nowadays. It's hard to compare that kind of thing. But I'd be really interested to like really go into the history of that kind of what it takes to do that type of procedure and that kind of thing in that time period, Yeah.
I actually posted a whole thing about it in the group. I went back and searched my own darn name, and wouldn't you know it, I cannot find the post anywhere. It was quite interesting because it was quite a rabbit hole I went down. Again, I have been seeing an ophthalmologist since I was 2. So I've had my eyes dilated a bazillion times, been through it all, and just was interested.
I have PenFed, that's a fact.
I have PenFed, that's a fact.
My credit card purchases get me cash back.
My credit card purchases get me cash back.
No one else gets these rewards.
Sergeant, that is just plain untrue.
What in tarnation?
Sir, PenFed's PowerCash Rewards Card isn't just for military members. Anyone can get cash back on all purchases.
Ah, Figgins! You've ruined my favorite song.
PenFed Credit Union. Visit PenFed.org/PowerCash. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed, insured by NCUA.
Today on News 4 at 4, we're working for you. An inside look at the local COVID vaccine trial for kids, what children reported days after getting the shot, and how it could impact the timeline of kids being vaccinated. Today at 4 p.m. on NBC4.
Tonight, it's The Voice Live rounds, and Nick Jonas wants his first win.
Let's get this done.
Who's got what it takes, and whose dream ends here? Watch live and vote to save your faves. The Voice Live rounds, tonight on NBC.
Chip and Mikey, is there anything else off the top of your head, questions? I know that we kind of...
This is the little one. I don't want to know M's name, but do you know M's name, Jim?
Yeah, I know where she lives. I got her phone number. I was gonna contact her, and I thought, you know what? There's so much information out there. When I was writing the book, I don't want to bother her with this. And I know another writer, did, and I didn't. I just felt like I don't need to do that to her. So I do know who she is.
Yeah, I respect
I believe Lewis spoke to her, Lou Romano. And she doesn't want to talk about it, as I can, I respect that,
Angelina also knows her name, and I also know her name. But we're not going to say
okay. If Mo knows the name, I still don't.
The name that is propagated as being her name is not her name.
This is a weird question too. Was when Remington talked to the psychic, was that the only psychic that he reached out to?
Yes.
The only one. Okay.
Yes. That we know of. Yeah. She was pretty good if he's telling the truth, and I have no reason to believe he would make that up. It's incredible how accurate she was. And she asked him to bring something connected to the boy. He brought a staple from the box.
Interesting.
But think about that. It's metal. And I've had that done before. I had this lady when I was like 15 said she was psychic. Oh, I need something that you carry with you all the time. I gave her my keys. And so it resonated with me. Okay, that makes sense. Some psychics, that's what they do. It's almost like an antenna for them. But to be able to say, I think he even, when they were driving, he purposely turned the wrong way. And she said, no, go back this way. And I just was blown away by that. But see, my wife can do that. Mm-hmm. So I believe it's true. So she has that ability. You can't put a finger on it why, but some people have it. So
the thing that makes it more intriguing to me is like during this period of time when Remington Bristow is talking to the psychic, it's not like she could just Google him, right? This isn't like our current internet age where nothing is secret, nothing is private. It's not like that. And so for her to not only know what he's thinking and where he is leaning in terms of a police investigation and his private thoughts and how he thinks, you know, who he thinks could be responsible or linked to the boy in the box. And then to go right to that house, to me, is very, very interesting.
People thought he was nuts, especially back then, you know, and they thought he was, you know, Rem, there's something wrong with you. Let it go, you know, and he couldn't let it go. And along the lines of the, you know, the psychic stuff, when I was there that day in 2007 for the 50th anniversary, February 26th, I got a call from my wife, and she was kind of upset. And she said at 3:30 in the morning, the girls were sleeping. She was sleeping. It's 6:30 in Philadelphia, 3-hour time difference. And she said they heard a shriek, like a child shriek. And it woke the girls up, and they were frightened out of their minds. And they ran into her room, and they got on her bed. And she told me this story. And I said, you know, the only time the boy ever said anything said was when his head was slammed against the floor and he shrieked. And so that's kind of what we've been dealing with in my house. So that really blew me away. And that was kind of the beginning of all this. That year, that 2007, 2008 was a rough year for us. And we actually had ghost hunters come in and, you know, into the house. It got out of hand.
Yeah, you were telling me you had to put all the boxes from the stuff out into the garage because things were getting really goofy.
I came home from work, and my wife said, and I won't tell you exactly what she said because I can't say it, but she said, get those boxes out of here.
You can say it. You should really listen to this show. You can say whatever you want.
Well, she said, get those fucking boxes out of here. That lady is so angry at you, and it's causing all kinds of trouble in our house.
I would have said the same thing.
And so I put it in the garage, and I sent them back. And now this is something that I haven't talked about, but the third box that had the 1998 exhumation and all the photographs disappeared. They never made it. And Tom was so angry when I had to tell him that. Tom Augustin, he sent the boxes to me. And he said, oh, God damn, you know, and I thought to myself, that lady, you know, that's her revenge. So I didn't keep the box. My wife would kill me. I brought it to the post office.
Oh, yeah.
And the third box never made it back.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about your wife and my mother. My mom, you wouldn't be leaving something in the house like that with my mom either, because she'd make a bonfire. She'd be like, this isn't going to be in the house. It's not in the house.
I know this isn't related. I'm sorry, guys. I'm getting off track here. But my last book I wrote about the Dogman cryptid. I don't know if you guys ever heard it.
We covered the Dogman. We're from Michigan.
Oh, that's right. Michigan, right. Yeah. And I wrote the book, and she said, well, she looks at me like, let me read it. She read it, and then she had a nightmare that this thing was chasing her. And next day she said, God damn it, I should have burned that book. You know, so
it's funny.
It is, but it wasn't to her, and she wouldn't laugh about it because it was real in the dream, you know. But anyway.
Yeah, no, I actually had a dream about our boy last night. So, but I tend to get premonitions in my dreams. My lifelong best friend lost her baby, and I had a dream before I knew it of an empty cradle. And I called, and she had lost her baby. I've had other dreams like that, especially about this particular friend, that always seem to be true when I get a hold of her, like a day or so later. Whatever I've dreamed about has been true.
Wow.
Do you mind sharing the dream about the boy, or do you want to keep it to yourself?
No, it was just I can't explain it. He was there. He was like a ghost. He was like there in the dream. I don't remember anything being said in the dream. He was just there.
Wow. He's probably saying, I thank you. I appreciate what you've been doing for me. Yeah.
Well, especially when you are dedicating yourself and all of your energy and all of your waking moments to something like this. Just in general, even if I were to watch a TV show too much, eventually it'll make its way into my dreams. And for this to be something that you're living and breathing all the time, that you're always trying to get shows to cover it, that you're always interacting, that you're always trying to find a new lead or a new answer or a new theory, immersing yourself like that, it has to bleed through. It's constantly in your consciousness, and eventually it is just a part of your subconscious that he is present, and he is a real person. He was a real boy, and he is somebody that's very present in lots of people's lives, people that are dedicated to discovering who this boy was and making sure that he has a name, making sure that he is remembered in a way that befits him.
Yeah. You look at his pictures, and I like the one that Carl Kopelman did. He tends to be very accurate, as I told you. And also, interestingly, the sculptor, that's what I wanted to get to earlier. The sculptor that did the age progression.
Frank Bender?
Yes, Frank Bender, that did the age progression of John List, said he thought the boy might have been being raised as a girl and that's why his hair was cut after he was killed, or around the time he was killed. And I suppose it's a theory. And like I said, I think Carl Kopelman probably has the most accurate drawing. He has had so much success.
I believe he's up to like 9 different cases of Jade and John Does that have been identified through his work at this point, which is amazing because he started on Web Sleuths. It was not his job. He just, in his spare time, decided that this was a thing that he wanted to try doing. It's amazing. So obviously the end goal for everyone is that the boy be identified, that the boy gets his name. Like you had mentioned, Angelina and Jim, obviously in your book, that the name Jonathan is the most prevalent out there in terms of matching a name. But that is the end goal, is to say, this is his name. It's definitely his name. Is there anything that you wish from the beginning that we would have known that we know now? The police did such an amazing job in this case. None of us can think of how they came up short because they were doing so much. But with time, we now have so many breakthroughs in science and forensic artistry, in questions that maybe didn't come up till years later.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I wish we'd have known sooner something that the genetic genealogist told me, which was that his dental age was 4, because we've gotten different age ranges through time, 3 to 5, 4 to 6, and also I see that he was 3 feet 6 inches tall. And like I said, his dental age was 4, according to what they told her. It would have been nice to know this stuff right in the beginning, and it kind of ticks me off, by the way, that the America's Unknown Child website is down. It is no longer there. That was the ultimate resource, and it's gone. I don't know if Jim was aware of that.
I did not know that. Wow. That's a sign to me that they're close to solving it, but that's a guess. To answer your question, though, I wish they had DNA. I do believe DNA will solve it. I will say this, something we haven't talked about this. I learned this through my friend Charles Stecker, which Angelina, you may know Charles Stecker. I'm not sure.
I interviewed him on my show. Yes.
Yeah. He's a great guy. And I think, big city, if it was M, her mom, the corruption, you can't underestimate, or even with the Foster family, Rem was incredulous. Why don't you guys press this guy? He's a good man. He does a great service. Leave him alone, but that's not the point.
And that is a mentality for sure. It is a mentality, I will say, in tons of cases that we've covered specifically, but most specifically with cases of people that had any sort of domestic abuse or suspicion around them. It was very much a mind your own business mentality. I mean, even now, sometimes it is.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for everyone, which kind of intrigues me is, all the items that were found in the box and with him. Do you think that this was to throw a bunch of stuff in the box and kind of throw red herrings out and all these like loose, things? Was it done out of like love and comfort, like when you bury certain items with, your loved ones, or you put them in the casket with them with an intent of like you're sending your love with them?
Yeah, because the shoes weren't his, the scarf,
the men's hat, and like
I think there's something to the men's hat.
I guess where everybody one at a time maybe go and kind of.
Yeah, no, I was going to talk about the men's hat. I'm glad that you both brought it up because they were able, even though it was hard back then because nobody used plastic to track things down. They were able to figure out who the customer was because the woman remembered it because
it was customized.
Right. He had her put that strap on it. So,
yeah. And she said the description of him sounds like he could be related, basically, that it could have been the boy's father. He was blonde haired. He was, between, I think, 26 and 30-ish, according to her estimations. So definitely, I think there's something to that. What that is, don't ask me.
Yeah.
So you guys think, though, that the items were placed with intent and like a well intent?
I think that was dropped.
Susquehanna Road was a dumping ground. I live in the high desert. People literally go down a road and dump all kinds of stuff. And you have a lot of stuff that was dumped. It was across from the Home for Wayward Girls, which is ironic because the little boys dumped there. But yeah, that's strange. That hat is definitely strange, but I mean, it could be just happenstance. I don't know. Maybe related to Bononis, the college kid that was, John Porosnik discovered the body on the 23rd, Saturday. And then the 25th is when Bononis first spotted the boy in the box. Porosnik didn't say anything. He was a kid. He was frightened. Bononis saw the boy. He was frightened. Maybe he was wearing hat. I don't know. That's just a stretch, but
anyone could have tossed the hat into a box too, or whatever on the side of the road.
But it wasn't in the box.
Yeah, it was on the path leading to the box.
Gotcha.
Really, the boy was just found, naked with the blanket. Now, if it is M's mother, it's kind of, I think to myself, wow, that's lucky break to have a nice big box there, size of a coffin almost, to dump it in. But she, according to M, clipped the nails, cut the hair, whatever. But that was just because she was OCD. Excuse my language. I don't mean to offend anybody. She was just a librarian, very particular. Well, I'm going to dump him this way. I mean, she didn't say, "Oh God, I feel so bad. I killed him." I don't think that. I think she just said, "Okay, well, I'm going to cut him, make him presentable. I can't throw him out like that." And so to her, it made her feel better. I don't think she cared about the boy, if it is, in fact, M's mother.
Yeah, and right. I always had the gut feeling about the clothing in the box because it was too big and it was quite a bit of it. I always got the feeling that maybe the clothes were already in the box, like being stored somewhere, and they just left them in the box.
Like from another child.
Or an adult. I think they were, one of the pieces of clothes was a man's shirt.
Remember when Rem went to the estate sale, they had a white bassinet.
Yeah.
How does that box from Arthur Nicoletti connect to the boy? I don't know. I have thought about it because Bill Kelly told me when M's mother killed the boy, the first thing she did was, quote unquote, this is what Bill Kelly told me, and it's in the book, is she called her boyfriend and said, this happened. Is it possible that she called Nicoletti and said, this is your problem too? I don't know what to do with him. And he said, I got this box. You can throw him in there. I don't know. Again, I tend to believe
the box could have been there.
That's
right?
true. That's true. and it was in pretty good shape. But then again, it was fairly cold. It wasn't a lot of precipitation around that time. So the box seemed to be pretty solid. And when I had the 3 evidence boxes in my house, I held a piece of that box in my hand. It was in a plastic like container. So when you talk about spiritual activity, paper, wood, ceramic, whatever, that could have been one of the reasons. Plus I had the autopsy photos and I couldn't even look at them. Truthfully, I couldn't do it.
Yeah, just going back to the shirt, I just want to check my notes. It was a child's scarf, a child's size flannel shirt, size 4, black shoes, and a children's size 1. And then coroner or a medical assistant tried the shoes on the boy. They were not the right size, but the child size flannel shirt was about the same size as the boy.
Oh, okay. It's been a while since I've read the reports.
And not only that, but I mean, I wore clothes that were too small or too big.
Anybody that has siblings that isn't the oldest, I thankfully was the oldest, okay, has had that. They're wearing clothes from their siblings. I mean, even anybody that is lower middle class or from a low income household, their family's getting hand-me-downs from other people in the neighborhood, from extended family members, from garage sales, from yard sales. That's how a good portion of America gets their clothing, from thrift stores, especially for smaller children, because they're not yet judged in the same way for their clothing in school that an older kid would be. So the parents feel like they have a lot more leeway with hand-me-downs. And just in general, even when they're older kids, a lot of parents have to do hand-me-downs.
I'm an only child, so.
I suppose from the idea, if you're going to dump a kid, better get rid of all the evidence. That would make sense to throw all the clothes out.
Yeah.
The cat, I can't explain. I can't really even explain the clothes. I've thought about it, but like you said, the detective said the clothes didn't really fit, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything because of what we just talked about, hand-me-downs, whatever. But again, Susquehanna Road was a dump site.
Yeah.
I mean, there was stuff everywhere.
And again, like Mikey said, it could be a red herring. It could have been clothes that were taken elsewhere from the dump site and then just put in the box or put closer, just one more thing to help obscure and say, don't pay attention to this box. It's just more junk. Like every other piece of junk here. Don't pay attention to it.
Well, it looked like in the picture, and maybe Jim can talk about this, to me at least, like the little boy was almost sticking out of the box, like his head and his shoulders were exposed.
That's true, yeah. And he was maybe 3 feet from the tree line, or from the brush line. It was a gravel road. So anyone that had, was kind of paying attention would notice it. When Bononis saw it, he thought, oh, it's a doll, and realized it's not. And in fact, Elmer Palmer, who was the police officer sent to first investigate on Tuesday around 10:15, he said he was thinking doll, his words.
Yeah, you hear that a lot. I think it's a mannequin or a doll, and then they go, uh-oh, that's not. That's a real person.
We're pretty sure that animals didn't really disturb the site, or at least didn't disturb the boy, but that isn't to say that they didn't see maybe the clothing had been on top of his legs or something to obscure and got moved by animals or birds trying to pick it up for nesting, or the wind.
Or the boy who found him first, right? Or he could have been covered by all of these clothes per se. And he was like, what's in the box, and, kind of thing. You never know.
He was interviewed, and a few weeks later when they sent out the cadets and that's when they found the cat and everything. And I don't recall him saying that. I suppose it's possible, but remember, it's Philadelphia, February, it's cold, and that's a great preserver, and that kept the body. I mean, if it were in, out here, oh my God, the wild animals and stuff where I live, they would have been all over it. And, but it was cold.
Yeah, because they smell that something is there. But I mean, even the wind in the winter, especially because there's not leaves to obscure the force of wind. Who knows?
Yeah.
Again, it's not saying that it It is. It's just saying there's so many external forces and things that we don't know. We don't know what if the shirt and all of these things around are unrelated completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know. You're right. We don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this person, whoever was trying to dispose of him in some way, didn't put a whole lot of energy or thought into hiding it. And it's February again in Philadelphia, so the ground's probably real hard. But most people bury a body or hide it in some way, shape, or form. They don't put it half propped out of a box, that's bizarre to me. It's really bizarre to me.
It seems like it was quick and lacking a lot of thought, but the panic.
Maybe they wanted him found.
That's what it makes me think, is that there was a lot of thought put into it. And this is what they exactly wanted. And that's why I asked about the items and everything around. Was it meant to be part of the chaos?
I was thinking about the cat some more. And I have to tell you, first of all, I live in New England, not terribly far from Philadelphia, Northeast, same weather. And the ground it's a rock in February.
Yeah.
My father had to bury our cat. I'm on the phone with my friend and I said, he can't do this. And she said, when I get home from work, we got a pickaxe. Literally had to use a pickaxe. And I will say both of my cats were buried with their favorite blanket. That could have been the cat's favorite blanket.
That's true. Or our favorite sweater. But still, if it's my cat, I'm not leaving it in a dumping ground where everyone leaves their garbage. It's just something about it is I don't want people to know about this cat. Again, it could be crazy. It could be that somebody just happened upon the cat and felt bad or didn't want to see it and covered it up with a sweater that was nearby.
Has M ever mentioned a cat?
Not that I know of, no. They didn't really have any incoming leads, and so the police had these cadets go out and they did like a quote-unquote grid search kind of thing. And Susquehanna Road's only like half a mile long, and so they're encompassing all this ground, and they found all this stuff, and like the really nice hat and the cat in the sweater, and why, I don't know why. It is strange. Maybe it is related, but it was a dumping ground. People just didn't care.
And that's why when the gentleman came across the woman and what he thought was a little boy, and this isn't M's story, M says it was her, that she looked like a boy. In the trunk of their car of Susquehanna Road one evening, he didn't think anything of it because people did use it as a dump.
Also, a lot of burning trash, too, which is still in many parts of the countries, people burn their trash.
We have the worst air in California, and they allow it, believe it or not. So I don't. But the guy, I call him the unknown motorist. I did interview him on the phone because Bill and him were friends, and he said, I won't talk to you except Bill asked me to do it. And he said, I won't give him my name. And then I said, what did you say to him? And it was interesting that all the reports said, he said, hey, do you need help with your tire? And he said, that's false. I said, hey, dumping is illegal. And then he drove away. And so as Angelina said, he knew that it was a dumping ground, and that's what he assumed. And in fact, he was right. But, Bill said, you were probably within a few seconds of seeing them either pull out the body or just finish putting the body in the box, if in fact it was M and her mother.
Well, M also mentioned the beans. And it wasn't very well known at that point that he had vomited some black gook, and it turned out that M mentioned he had eaten beans.
Which I believe at the time, I'm not sure if it just wasn't well known, because I was pretty sure that it was one of those strange guilty knowledge things that the police held back from being known. I'm not positive. Don't quote me on that. But I'm pretty sure it was something that she just should not have known.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. And that's what precipitated the beating, because he vomited in the tub and the mom lost it, pulled him out, slammed him down, that sort of a thing. Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? That, what is it? I forget the coroner's name. He mentioned a brown substance in the throat. And then M, 30 years later, or whatever it is, says, well, he had baked beans and he vomited.
Yeah. Is there anything that either of you would like to add before we go?
I just want to thank Jim for being here. And I also want to point out, Jim once again is sacrificing family time. He has a daughter that is very sick right now. And I so appreciate him being here in spite of that. And Divine is continually in my prayers.
Thank you so much.
I am so sorry. I appreciate your time.
She's got my wife's stamina. She's right now, I can hear her on her Zoom session for her math class, but she is sick. They're trying to figure out what's wrong. And everybody, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was a delight, and it was honestly a delight to read your book. I already have your Dog Man book in my Amazon cart right now. But thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you guys for having us on.
Is there anywhere else you would like to send people to?
I do have an author page. You could see all the crazy books I wrote. And I do have a YouTube channel, but I get into weird stuff like UFOs, cryptids, ghosts.
That's our shit, Jim.
Well, the latest thing I've been doing is with David Lifton, who wrote Best Evidence, that Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy. They altered the body. And my YouTube channel is called Boko, B-O-K-O Cafe, 2 words, stir fry for the mind.
We
appreciate it. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Angelina.
Thanks again.
We want to thank Angelina and Jim for joining us once again and tell you that you can find links on where to find them in the show notes. Links to Jim's book and YouTube page, as well as the Boy in the Box Facebook group and Angelina's podcast, Kidmissing Radio. We'll see you next time, and keep searching for the deep, dark truth. I did it, Chip. Are you happy?
You just listened to the Deep Dark Truth Podcast. See you next time. And remember, your local cryptids want to meet you.
Okay, parachutes ready.
Boy, the things I go through to get auto loan rates as low as 0.99% APR for 60 months on new vehicles with PenFed.
You are aware that you don't have to be a military member to save hundreds on your auto loan, aren't you? Anyone can join PenFed.
As someone terrified of heights, I probably should have looked into that.
Probably.
Drop me off at the shore.
PenFed Credit Union. Visit PenFed.org/autos or call 1-800-247-5626. Advertised rates available through the PenFed car buying service. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed, insured by NCUA.
Hey, imagine if all your frustrations about advertising your business could be solved right now. You should know that podcast listeners are more engaged and higher converting than any other advertising medium. So try AdHub today and reap the rewards of Spreaker's self-advertising platform. It makes it as effortless as ever to be heard by thousands, regardless of the listening app they use. Visit Spreaker.com/AdHub. That's SPREAKER.com/AdHub and start using your advertising dollars in an impactful way.